In 1965, 3 miners blasted through a solid rock wall. Behind it lay a tomb that shouldn't exist. Inside were 12 skeletons, neatly arranged in 2 rows. Each one stood nearly 9 feet tall. Resting beside them were bronze-like weapons, and the walls were covered in an unrecognizable script. Within 72 hours, the mine shaft was completely sealed with concrete. The miners signed strict non-disclosure agreements, took the hush money, and walked away. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Starting back in 1901, at least 12 coal mines in Kentucky were mysteriously and permanently sealed. Every single one of them struck the exact same thing: giant human remains, strange, corrosion-resistant metals, and stone sarcophagi etched with cryptic symbols. One miner even swore he saw a bizarre mirror, lighter than aluminum, harder than steel, projecting a reflection that looked like a 3D hologram. The very next day, that entire tunnel was blown shut with dynamite. What's even more chilling, the Smithsonian Institution reportedly sent agents to investigate. Then the reports vanished. The bones disappeared. Even the mine entrances magically collapsed. These corporations were willing to abandon millions in coal just to keep these shafts buried forever. What did they find down there that was so much more dangerous than lost profits? Who exactly is trying to keep the world from knowing that giants once walked the earth? To unravel this mystery, we have to travel back over a century to eastern Kentucky. At the dawn of the 20th century, this was the most ruthless coal boomtown in America. Mining tycoons armed with dynamite and steam shovels flooded into the Appalachian Mountains. They hollowed out mountain after mountain. The companies only cared about one metric: daily tons extracted. Stumble upon an ancient ruin, bulldoze it. Dig up strange skeletons, bury them. In their eyes, the underground held only one thing of value: black coal. The miners certainly weren't out to preserve history either. Most hadn't even finished grade school. They spent their days hunched over in pitch-black tunnels, working grueling 12-hour shifts, lungs full of coal dust, constantly living under the threat of a fatal cave-in. Their goal was brutally simple: mine the coal, load the carts, and make it out alive. Yet ironically, it was these very men who first stumbled upon things that defied human history. Around 1901, deep underground, miners in Breathitt County began reporting bizarre anomalies. They were digging up bones, not animal bones, and definitely not normal human ones. These remains were incredibly long and impossibly thick, and they were laid out with chilling precision. These weren't random bodies tossed in a ditch. This was a meticulously crafted ancient burial site. The first man to leave behind a detailed record was a veteran mine foreman named Silas Hatcher. His private journal unexpectedly surfaced during an estate auction in 1998. In his diary, he documented how his excavation crew blasted through a rock face near Jackson, revealing a hidden burial chamber behind it. Inside lay 7 skeletons, perfectly aligned. The shortest was nearly 8 feet tall. The tallest towered at over 10 feet. What was even more disturbing: every single skull possessed a double row of teeth, and their femurs were thicker than a pickaxe handle. Hatcher reported the find immediately. The mine owner brought in a doctor from Lexington to take measurements and samples. A report was written, but it never saw the light of day. 2 weeks later, the entire chamber was backfilled with rubble, erased as if it never existed. Hatcher penned one final thought in his journal: "The company gave us double our monthly pay and told us the tomb was empty when we breached it. We all knew it was a damn lie, but we all took the money." That single entry became the chilling blueprint for what every miner experienced over the next 60 years. Uncover an anomaly, report it, get silenced, take the payout, repeat. In 1934, a Louisville daily newspaper buried a tiny blurb on page 9. Deep inside a cave near Prestonsburg, massive skeletal remains had been discovered. 2 hunters exploring the depths stumbled upon a skeleton standing 9 foot 4 inches tall. It was resting inside a sarcophagus carved from a single block of limestone. The lid was engraved with symbols nobody could decipher. The article concluded by stating that the Smithsonian Institution had dispatched an agent to Kentucky to investigate. Follow-up story coming next week. That follow-up never saw print, and if you dig into the Smithsonian's official archives, you won't find a single trace of this expedition ever taking place. 40 years later, researchers tried to locate that very cave. The landowner's response: "It caved in, long gone." But the black and white newspaper print still exists. There's one specific statistic you need to pay attention to. Between 1920 and 1950, in eastern Kentucky alone at least, 12 highly profitable coal mines were permanently shuttered. The official excuses were all over the place: dangerous gas levels, structural instability, severe groundwater flooding. Sounds perfectly reasonable, right? But run the numbers and the narrative completely falls apart. Every single one of these mines was sitting on massive, proven reserves of high-grade coal. They were literal cash cows. No mining corporation in their right mind would walk away from a fixable structural issue and abandon millions of dollars in resources. Unless, of course, they encountered something down in the dark that terrified them far more than an unstable tunnel. Off the record, the miners' whispers were shockingly consistent: hidden tombs, colossal skeletons, metallic artifacts that refused to rust or decay, stone tablets covered in alien text. Then in 1956, a crucial whistleblower stepped out of the shadows. His name was Robert Cantrell, a state mine inspector for Kentucky. a man with formal, rigorous engineering training. While investigating a routine cave-in in Harlan County, Cantrell stumbled right into an intact, undisturbed burial chamber. But this time, it wasn't an uneducated miner telling tall tales. It was a professional engineer taking meticulous field notes. In his official state report, he laid it out clearly. The chamber was a perfect square, about 30 feet on each side. The vaulted ceiling peaked at exactly 15 feet. The walls were constructed of precisely cut masonry, bearing the unmistakable tool marks of advanced stonework. This was no natural cave formation. This was deliberately and artificially engineered. In the absolute center, 3 skeletons lay side by side on a stone altar. The smallest measured 8'2". The largest stretched a staggering 9'7". The bone density and muscle attachment points on all 3 far exceeded the biological limits of any modern human. Cantrell submitted his bombshell report to the Department of Mines. The brass handed him back a single directive. Rewrite it. Scrub every mention of the tomb and those remains from the record. Cantrell firmly refused. 1 week later, he was reassigned to a dead-end desk job. Within a month, that mine shaft was sealed solid with a concrete plug. Years later, Cantrell went public with a quote that alternative history researchers still cite to this day. "I saw what I saw. I measured what I measured. We sealed up a room full of genuine giants because somebody out there didn't want the world to know they existed." But perhaps the most jaw-dropping testimony of all comes from Jesse Combs, a first-hand witness to the 1965 incident. In 1998, Combs was in his late 70s. Silicosis had already eaten away most of his lungs. He knew he didn't have much time left. So after 33 years of complete silence, he decided to finally come clean. He sat down with a local historian and laid out every excruciating detail of that fateful day. 12 massive skeletons split into 2 rows, 6 bodies per row, all positioned facing perfectly due east. Beside every single body rested a weapon, a long sword or a heavy spear. They looked like ancient bronze but possessed a density and hardness far beyond it. The walls of the chamber were completely covered in intricate carvings. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language known to modern man. He and his crew stood frozen in that tomb for maybe 10 minutes before the foreman radioed up to the surface. In less than an hour, corporate management rushed down, armed with cameras. They snapped photos. They took measurements and bagged samples. And then a single order was barked: evacuate. Everything that followed felt meticulously choreographed. The miners were immediately hauled into the main office. Pre-drafted documents were waiting on the desk, swearing under penalty of law that they had found absolutely nothing. If they breathed a word to anyone, they'd be fired on the spot and blacklisted from every coal mine in Kentucky for life. Sign the paper, take 2 months severance, and vanish. Combs admitted, "I took the damn money because I had a family to feed. But I've spent my whole life trying to forget what I saw down in that dark hole. Those things were not normal human beings. They were literal giants, and they were buried with the honor of fallen kings." Just 6 months after that chilling interview, Jesse Combs passed away. The cassette tape of his confession collected dust for 17 years, until an independent researcher unearthed it in 2015 and dumped the audio onto the internet. Today, anyone with an internet connection can listen to it. You can hear the gravelly voice of an old miner, recounting hyper-specific details with unwavering conviction, dripping with the heavy regret of keeping a 33-year secret. That raw recording has now racked up over 500,000 views. Now skeptics are probably wondering, could this just be a localized urban legend isolated to the hills of Kentucky? Not a chance. Take Lovelow. CK Cave in Nevada. Back in 1911, miners harvesting bat guano dug up a massive cache of bizarre human remains and artifacts. Among the haul were massive woven sandals measuring over 15 inches long. Interestingly, the oral traditions of the local Paiute tribe have always warned of a violent race of red-haired giants, known in their legends as the Sitika. According to lore, these towering warriors were incredibly savage, and were eventually cornered and burned alive inside that very cave. And when modern archaeologists excavated the site, deep within the cavern walls, they found undeniable evidence of massive, intense fires. Or look at the mysterious mound builders of the Ohio River Valley. During large-scale archaeological digs in the 19th century, extraordinarily oversized human skeletons were repeatedly pulled from the earth. Even the New York Times, back in 1902, ran stories documenting these colossal finds. But here's where it gets incredibly strange. Sometime after 1920, all these headlines just completely dropped off the map. The discoveries didn't magically stop. The media just stopped reporting them. Independent researcher Jim Vieira has meticulously compiled over 1,500 archival news clippings from the 1800s and early 1900s, all detailing the unearthing of giant human remains. These weren't from cheap tabloids. They were mainstream publications. They directly quoted prominent physicians, credentialed scientists, and sworn local officials. They included hard measurements. Some even featured distinct photographs. Yet today, try tracking down the physical evidence. You won't find a single oversized bone in the collection of any museum or university across the country. So we're left with 2 options. Either every newspaper in America was colluding in a massive, pointless hoax, or someone, or some organization, has systematically purged the undeniable proof of these giants completely from our historical record. But let's circle back to Kentucky. There is one massive difference between the Appalachian mines and the rest of these sites. Everywhere else, the skeletons were carted off and lost in backroom archives. But in Kentucky, the bones were never moved. They were forcefully buried right back where they were found. The tombs, along with everything inside them, were entombed in layers of poured concrete and blasted rock, sealed perfectly in place. The smoking gun is still down there, not rotting away in a classified museum warehouse, but locked deep inside the bedrock of Kentucky. Today, those dormant mines are entirely locked down by private corporations. Stepping foot on the property is a serious trespassing felony. However, over the past 2 decades, sharp-eyed locals have noticed a chilling pattern. Bizarrely, at these long-abandoned, supposedly dead mine sites, convoys of heavy trucks and drilling rigs roll in under the cover of darkness. The relentless grinding of heavy drills echoes for weeks, and then, sudden, dead silence. Witnesses have reported seeing unmarked trucks hauling heavily tarped cargo away just before dawn. When locals call the cops, the answer is always the same. It's just the mining company conducting routine geological surveys on their private land. Everything is strictly legal. But here's the glaring problem with that logic. Those coal seams were completely tapped out decades ago. So what exactly are they desperately drilling for in the dead of night? Maybe sealing them up back then was just about controlling the narrative. But today, with massive leaps in material science and advanced analytics, those buried, rust-proof metallic artifacts, and those untranslatable alien hieroglyphs might just be worth 10,000 times more than the coal ever was. Whoever controls those abandoned shafts holds the master key to the only remaining door to the truth. It's not academic researchers. It's not independent archaeologists. It's not even government officials. It's the faceless corporations that own the literal ground above it. Buried beneath the soil of Kentucky could be the hard, physical evidence to completely rewrite human history. It remains trapped behind walls of concrete, fiercely protected by trespassing laws and monopolized by corporate interests. But the truth has a funny habit. It doesn't fear the passage of time. Lost journals get found, hidden tapes get leaked online, and deathbed confessions eventually see the light of day. Someone has spent a century desperately trying to bury this secret. But the thing about secrets, the deeper they are buried, the more earth-shattering they are when they finally get dug up.